What would you do if your sibling had you cut out of the will, only to discover a secret trust fund made you the true heir? My brother Marcus thought he'd played the perfect game. For 3 years, he slowly poisoned our father against me while positioning himself as the devoted son. But what he didn't know was that Dad had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. It started when Dad was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Nothing severe, just occasional forgetfulness and some confusion with dates. Marcus saw opportunity where I saw tragedy. He moved back into Dad's sprawling estate in Westchester, claiming he wanted to help with the transition. I lived 2 hours away in Manhattan, running my consulting firm and visiting every weekend like I had for years. Marcus began his campaign subtly. He'd mention how busy I seemed whenever Dad brought up my visits. "You know how demanding Alex's work is," he'd say with false sympathy. "Big city life really consumes people." When I'd call during the week, Marcus would answer and say Dad was resting, then forget to mention I called. He installed himself as the gatekeeper between Dad and the outside world. The first red flag came during Thanksgiving dinner. Dad seemed confused about a business deal I'd helped him with the previous year. "I don't remember you being involved with the Hartford property," he said, looking genuinely puzzled. Marcus jumped in smoothly. "Dad, that was me who handled Hartford. Remember? Alex was tied up with that merger." I started to correct him, but Dad looked so uncertain that I let it slide, not wanting to upset him. Over the next few months, Marcus systematically rewrote our family history. My college graduation became his. The vacation home in Vermont that I'd helped Dad buy became Marcus's idea. Even childhood memories got reassigned. Marcus would sit with Dad for hours, looking through photo albums and gently correcting Dad's recollections. "That's actually me in that Little League uniform, Dad. Alex played soccer, remember?" I tried talking to Dad privately about what was happening, but Marcus had gotten there first. "Marcus warned me you might say something like this," Dad said sadly. "He's worried about your stress levels. Maybe you should talk to someone professional." The manipulation was so smooth, so gradual, that even I started questioning my own memories sometimes. The lawyer visits began in January. Marcus drove Dad to appointments with Edgar Whitmore, the family attorney who'd handled our affairs for decades. I wasn't invited to these meetings. When I asked Dad about them, he'd look blank and say he couldn't remember discussing anything important. Marcus would later tell me they were just routine updates to outdated paperwork. By spring, Dad's condition had worsened slightly, but he was still legally competent according to his doctor. That's when Marcus played his master stroke. He convinced Dad that I was trying to have him declared incompetent so I could take control of his assets. "Alex has been asking a lot of questions about your mental state," Marcus told him during one of my visits. I overheard him on the phone with someone discussing guardianship options. I'd never had any such conversation, but Dad's eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. "Is this true, Alex?" he asked quietly. I denied it completely, but the damage was done. Marcus had planted the seed perfectly, and Dad's compromised memory made him vulnerable to these suggestions. From that point forward, Dad became distant and suspicious whenever we were alone together. The final blow came in June. I arrived for my usual weekend visit to find the locks changed. Marcus answered the door with a sad expression. "Dad asked me to give you this," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter in Dad's shaky handwriting saying he needed space to think about our relationship and asking me not to visit for a while. "He's very upset about the guardianship thing," Marcus explained. "Maybe if you gave him some time to cool down." I spent the next 3 months trying to reach Dad through phone calls that went unanswered and letters that got no response. Marcus would occasionally text me updates. "Dad's doing well. Still needs space," or "Doctor says stress isn't good for his condition right now." I consulted with elder abuse attorneys, but without proof of coercion or evidence that Dad was incompetent, my options were limited. Then came the call I'd been dreading. Dad had died peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday morning in September. Marcus called me at work, his voice carefully modulated with just the right amount of grief. "I'm sorry, Alex. I know you two were working things out." The funeral arrangements had already been made. Dad would be buried Thursday. He wanted something small and private, Marcus explained. At the funeral, I was shocked by how few people were there. Dad had dozens of friends and business associates, but only maybe 20 people showed up. I later learned that Marcus had made most of the calls personally, telling people Dad wanted a very intimate service. He'd effectively isolated Dad in death, just like he had in life. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday. I sat in Edgar Whitmore's office expecting the worst, and that's exactly what I got. Marcus inherited everything. The estate, the investment portfolio, the business interests, everything worth approximately $12 million. I received a single item, Dad's old Rolex watch, worth maybe $3,000. The letter of explanation was devastating. While I love both my sons, I feel that Marcus has shown greater dedication to family in recent years. I hope Alex will understand and find success in his own endeavors. Marcus played his part perfectly, looking surprised and even a little embarrassed by the windfall. "Dad must have been more confused than we thought," he said to Edgar. "This doesn't seem right." But he didn't offer to split anything or suggest the will might not reflect Dad's true wishes. Edgar explained that the will was legally sound, witnessed properly, and Dad had been declared mentally competent by his physician at the time of signing. I left that office feeling completely defeated. 3 months later, I was still struggling with the grief and anger when Edgar called with unexpected news. "Alex, can you come in this afternoon? Something's come up regarding your father's estate." His tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear something underneath it. I arrived at Edgar's office to find him sitting with Margaret Chun, a trust attorney I didn't recognize. Edgar looked uncomfortable as he spread documents across his conference table. "Alex, I need to ask you something. Did your father ever mention a trust fund to you? Something separate from his will?" My heart started pounding. "No, never." "Why?" Margaret took over the explanation. "I've been retained by First National Bank to locate the beneficiary of a trust established by your father 23 years ago. The trust was designed to remain dormant until triggered by specific conditions. Your father's death was one of those triggers." She opened a thick folder and showed me documents I'd never seen before. "According to these papers, your father created what's called a generation-skipping trust when you graduated college. The initial funding was $500,000, but it's been invested conservatively for over 2 decades. The current value is approximately $3.2 million. I stared at the papers, trying to process what she was saying. But why didn't Edgar know about this? Edgar shifted uncomfortably. "Your father used a different firm to establish the trust. Rothschild and Associates downtown. They dissolved 5 years ago, and their trust administration was transferred to First National. The bank has been trying to locate you for months, but you'd moved since the trust was established." Margaret continued, "The trust was designed with very specific conditions. First, it would only be activated after your father's death. Second, you had to be excluded from his will or receive less than 10% of his estate. Third, there was a 6-month waiting period after the will was probated." My head was spinning. So Dad knew this might happen. "More than that," Edgar said quietly. "There's a letter." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's younger, steadier handwriting. This was in his safe deposit box with instructions to give it to you if the trust was ever activated. I opened the letter with shaking hands. "My dear Alex, if you're reading this, then my fears about your brother have come true. I've watched Marcus his entire life, and I know his character. He's charming and persuasive, but he's always been jealous of your success and your independence. When I was diagnosed with dementia, I realized he might see an opportunity to manipulate me. I created this trust when you graduated college because I was so proud of the man you'd become. You never asked me for money, never expected inheritance, and you built your own success. Marcus has always felt entitled to my wealth, and I suspected he might try to claim it all if given the chance. The trust has conditions that would only be met if Marcus succeeded in turning me against you. If you're reading this, it means he managed to manipulate a sick old man into cutting out his own son. I'm sorry for whatever pain this caused you, but I needed to see his true nature. The money in the trust is yours free and clear. But more importantly, you now know what kind of person your brother really is. Use this knowledge wisely. I love you, son. I always have. Dad. P.S. Check the safety deposit box at First National. Box 2847. The key is in the trust documents." I sat there crying in Edgar's office while Margaret and Edgar gave me privacy to process everything. When I finally composed myself, Margaret explained the trust details. The money was mine immediately, with no restrictions. The trust had been managed conservatively, but effectively, growing from $500,000 to $3.2 million over 23 years. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "Does he know about this?" Edgar shook his head. "The trust was completely separate from the estate I administered. As far as I know, Marcus has no idea it exists." I spent the next 2 days deciding how to handle the situation. Part of me wanted to gloat, to show up at the family estate and reveal Dad's master plan. But a larger part just felt sad for all of us. Dad had been playing chess while Marcus and I were playing checkers, but it meant our family was truly broken. I decided to visit the safety deposit box first. Margaret met me at the bank with the documentation needed to access box 2847. Inside, I found more documents, some family photos, and another letter. This one was shorter. "Alex, if you're here, you've probably decided not to tell Marcus about the trust yet. That's the right choice. He needs to understand the consequences of his actions, but revenge won't heal our family. The additional documents in this box include evidence of Marcus's manipulation tactics. I wasn't as confused as he thought, and I kept records. You'll find recordings from my phone. I learned how to use the voice recorder app, copies of emails he sent using my account, and financial records showing money he transferred to himself over the past year. This evidence isn't for revenge. It's for protection. Marcus will eventually discover the trust, and he'll try to contest it. These documents will prove his manipulation and fraud, protecting your inheritance. But more importantly, they'll prove that I knew what I was doing when I signed my will. I chose to let him think he'd won because I wanted him to reveal his true character completely. The choice of what to do with this information is yours. Dad, I photographed everything and put the originals back in a box. Dad had been thorough. He'd recorded conversations where Marcus coached him on what to say about me. He'd save emails Marcus sent pretending to be Dad, including one to Edgar requesting changes to the will. There were bank records showing Marcus had transferred almost $200,000 from Dad's accounts to his own over 6 months, claiming it was for household expenses. Marcus had committed fraud, and Dad had documented all of it. That evening, I finally called my brother. He answered cheerfully, as if we were still on good terms. "Alex, how are you holding up? I know this has been hard on you." "I'm doing better than expected," I said carefully. "Actually, I was wondering if we could meet for dinner. There are some things we should discuss." "Of course. I've been hoping we could work on our relationship. Dad would have wanted that." We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Marcus looked prosperous and relaxed, clearly enjoying his new wealth. He talked about renovating the estate and maybe buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. "Dad would have wanted the family home to be perfect," he said, as if he'd inherited a responsibility rather than stolen a fortune. "Speaking of Dad's wishes," I said, "I found something interesting this week." I pulled out a copy of the trust documents and placed them on the table. Marcus looked confused at first, then his expression changed as he realized what he was looking at. His face went white as he scanned the pages. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's Dad's real will," I said calmly. "The one that shows what he actually thought of both of us." Marcus tried to bluster. "This can't be real. Edgar would have known." Edgar didn't know because Dad used a different firm. He wanted to make sure his backup plan stayed secret. I leaned forward. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. "You can't have this money. I earned it. I took care of him while you were playing businessman in the city. I deserve that inheritance." "You deserve what Dad gave you," I said, which was everything he owned at the time of his death. "But this trust was established years ago, and you can't touch it." "I'll contest it," Marcus snarled. "I'll prove he was incompetent when he created it." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo from a safety deposit box. It was one of Dad's audio recordings, clearly dated and time-stamped. "Go ahead and contest it. But you should know Dad wasn't as confused as you thought. He recorded quite a few interesting conversations." Marcus went silent, probably realizing how much evidence Dad might have gathered. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to understand what you've lost," I said quietly. "Not just money, but family. Dad gave you every opportunity to be a good son and brother. Instead, you chose manipulation and fraud." I stood up to leave. "Oh, and Marcus? I'd recommend paying back the $200,000 you transferred from Dad's accounts. The bank records are very clear about those unauthorized transactions." Marcus called after me as I walked away, but I didn't turn around. I'd said everything that needed saying. Over the next few months, I used the trust money to establish a foundation in Dad's name focused on elder abuse prevention. It felt right to turn his pain into something that could help other families avoid what we went through. I also hired attorneys to ensure Marcus repaid the money he'd stolen, though I didn't press criminal charges. Marcus eventually tried to contest the trust, just as Dad had predicted. His lawyers argued that Dad wasn't competent when he established it 23 years earlier, which was obviously ridiculous. When they heard about the recordings and documentary evidence Dad had gathered, they advised Marcus to drop the case. The estate renovation Marcus had planned became impossible when he had to repay the stolen money. He ended up selling Dad's house to cover his debts and legal fees. I bought it through an intermediary, not because I wanted to live there, but because I couldn't stand the thought of strangers owning our family home. I never moved back to the estate. Instead, I converted it into a retreat center for families dealing with dementia and elder care issues. The foundation runs programs that are helping people navigate the challenges Dad and our family faced, minus the manipulation and fraud. Marcus and I haven't spoken since that dinner 2 years ago. I occasionally hear about him through mutual acquaintances. He moved to Florida and works in real estate now. Part of me feels sorry for him because he threw away his family for money he never actually got to keep. But mostly, I feel sorry for Dad, who spent his final years knowing one of his sons was betraying him. The trust fund changed my life, but not in the way Marcus probably imagines. The money was significant, but the real gift was understanding how much Dad loved and trusted me. Even when his mind was failing, even when Marcus was poisoning him against me, Dad believed in my character enough to protect my future. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Marcus had just been a good brother and son. Dad would have split everything equally, and we'd still be family. Marcus would have inherited $6 million instead of the nothing he ended up with. But greed and jealousy made him choose a different path. The foundation has helped over 300 families in the past year, providing resources and support for people dealing with dementia and elder care. Every time I see a family stay together through these challenges instead of being torn apart, I think about Dad's planning and sacrifice. Marcus got exactly what he deserved, everything Dad owned at the moment of his death, minus the love and respect he'd thrown away trying to get it. And I got what Dad always intended, his true legacy, his trust in my character, and the resources to help other families avoid the pain ours endured. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's definitely been a journey worth sharing. Until we meet again, folks, if you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.